Hello, friends, and welcome to Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly podcast designed to help mainstream Texans of faith understand the legislative process and help you engage with public policy in the great state of Texas. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness, and today we're excited to be joined by Emily Bourgeois. Emily is the community organizer of RAC-Texas, the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, one of Texas Impact's member institutions. We always enjoy working with Emily across a wide range of policy issues, including public education, religious freedom, and more. Over the last month, we've had several episodes about the holy seasons many of our traditions have been observing. Emily will talk to us today about Passover and the intersection with advocacy. But before we get to Emily, I've said a few times this month that I hope Texans of faith are finding meaning and hope during this holy season that's otherwise full of angst and worry about the issues of the world around us. I pray that those feelings will sustain us through the slog of a year we will inevitably encounter, but also motivate us to get involved and do the work to help create a more just and equitable world. TexasImpact.org has opportunities to learn more and get involved. We hope that you'll consider joining one of our teams or issue champion teams, or that you'll help mobilize your community or congregation through the Texas Faith Votes campaign. Learn more at TexasImpact.org. If you have questions or need more information, you can always reach out at scott@TexasImpact.org. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with Emily Bourgeois. Joining us for today's conversation is Emily Bourgeois, community organizer of RAC-Texas, the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, which is one of Texas Impact's member institutions. Emily, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We are glad that you're here. We know that you did some incredible work during the legislative session, and it's always great to see you here on the podcast. But let's start out talking about RAC-Texas for those who aren't familiar. Talk to us about your work.
Yeah, so RAC-Texas is one of 9 state-level affiliates of the Religious Action Center. We are the social justice wing of the Reform movement, which is the largest Jewish denomination in North America. And I run all of our Texas operations. So
Texas is a big state. That's a lot. Talk to us about the issues that y'all have been involved in.
Yeah, so prior to my time here, we were working a lot on immigration and voting rights. And then I came in and had a background kind of in the early childhood space. So we worked a lot on the maternal mortality bill last legislative session. And then most recently, we were big partners with Texas Impact on the chaplains stuff.
A lot of work on the chaplains, and we appreciate that. Maternal mortality, one of the bright spots from the legislative session. So
yeah, I would say
that's going to feel good, right?
Yeah, I would say one of very few, but it was
one
really
of
great.
very few. And the work on chaplains was great as well. So we'll take 2 wins in those areas. Emily, we've been talking a lot this month with folks about the convergence of holy seasons that took place in the month of April. And Passover is certainly a big one. Began before sundown on Monday, April 22nd, and concludes after nightfall on April 30th. For those who are less familiar, talk to us about what we should know about Passover.
Yeah. So Passover is a little bit later this year than normal because we have a Hebrew leap month, which happens occasionally. So Passover is the story it's the 8-day festival that commemorates the 400 years of slavery of the Israelites under Egyptian rule and our subsequent liberation, and then time in the desert and redemption by God.
And for a lot of these holy seasons, and I assume Passover as well, there is an intersection with advocacy work. Do you see that? Is that real? And what's that intersection?
Yeah, 100%. So one of the cool things about Passover is that it is the most widely observed Jewish holiday. So even people who don't observe like Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah or some of our other big Jewish holidays, Hanukkah, will observe Passover and we'll observe the Seder. And there's a couple of different things that we do. So we'll have, 1 or 2, depending on your family's tradition, Seders where we use a Haggadah to recount the story of our slavery and our liberation. And there's a lot of themes there of slavery and liberation. We have a meal and we have a Seder plate, which has metaphorical and like symbolic foods on it. And so one of the things that there are a couple of different places where advocacy comes into Passover. And one of those places is in our Haggadahs, in our like the central text of the Passover Seder. There are any different number of Haggadahs that you can get from like the very, very traditional, like 4-hour-long Hebrew heavy, like very traditional Haggadahs to like a Curb Your Enthusiasm Haggadah or like a 5-minute Haggadah, so that like you're covering, for those with kids, like you're covering all of the top level things, but then like you're really getting to the food and bedtime.
Right.
So there are any number of Haggadahs for like any number of social justice interests that someone may have. So a lot of our different partner organizations in like Dayenu will do like a climate Haggadah where you're talking about things like water conservation and food scarcity. There are feminist Haggadahs, tons of feminist Haggadahs. There's, a number of different ones that focus on like peace in the Middle East or like racial justice Haggadahs, things like that. And then on our Seder plates, traditionally there are the things that have been on Seder plates for hundreds and hundreds of years. So it's like you have an egg, which is kind of where the Easter egg comes from, like the circuitous nature of the world and the circle of life.
Right.
Or you have like haroset, or which is like supposed to represent the mortar of the bricks that we laid in Egypt, things like that. But we'll add like different things to the Seder plate. So like the most like traditional of the social justice editions actually is like an orange, which talks about the contributions that women and LGBT Jews have made to Judaism. But then there's also like the addition of an olive to represent solidarity between Israelis and Palestinians, for example. Or you have, some people will have a completely empty Seder plate to like represent food scarcity and food deserts. Or there was an addition of a banana one year to talk about like farming practices and sustainable farming, things like that. So Passover is one of those holidays that, because we're talking about slavery and we're talking about liberation, and like the main theme is like we are supposed to remember the Exodus, and we're supposed to remember as if we ourselves are slaves in Egypt, and we journey from slavery to liberation over the course of one night. There's tons of social justice themes that people incorporate and things like that.
That's interesting, and a lot of really good examples that you share. I wonder, with everything going on in the world right now, what you are especially mindful of this year during Passover.
Yeah, so one of the things that the RAC has put together is our 10 modern plagues. So a facet of the Passover Haggadah is the 10 plagues that befall on the Egyptians that eventually allow for Pharaoh to liberate the Israelites from Egypt. And the thing that we've done this year is we've compiled 10 modern plagues on the United States, and things that we're especially like keeping in our hearts and our minds right now. The one that I am most proud of, I don't know if I can necessarily say I'm proud of it, but my contribution to the 10 modern plagues was the chaplain bill that's spreading across the United States. And so we have this addendum that allows people to read about what's going on and have some call to actions. So you can talk to your governor and tell them to veto the bill if it's working your way through the legislature. Or, we're really active in reproductive justice right now with everything going on in Florida and in Arizona, and our work on the Ohio ballot initiative this past fall. So we've got reproductive justice. We're ramping up our 2024 election work because there's like a presidential election this year or something.
I've heard a rumor of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I keep hearing whispers about it. I just don't know. So there's some call to actions about voter suppression and barriers to voting as well there. So we've got a lot going on. And that's a really helpful supplement. It's one of the things that we put out, I think, occasionally to really help people be more mindful and add meaning to the work. the last thing that they add, and is like one of the most important things, is anti-Semitism, because we know anti-Semitism is on the rise right now in the United States. It's something that our community is really mindful of. And so there's a call to action there to help and to ask Congress to help direct funding towards safe places of worship that are across the board. It's not just for synagogues, but yeah.
I know I will join many of our listeners in going to look for that top 10 list, or that list of 10. I assume that's on the RAC-Texas site?
Yeah, it's on our RAC.org website. So it's coming from our DC office and not me in Austin, because it's for all 9 of our affiliates. But yeah, it's right there. All right. We'll
definitely have to check that out. And I do think, or my hope is, I guess, during Passover that you're able to find time of meaning and be mindful of all of those different plagues. Do all of them have a call to action, or what do you hope the call to action is coming out of the season?
Yeah, so all of those specific plagues, all of those specific issues will have a call to action associated with them, all 10 of them. And we were really mindful of picking things that we were actively working on at some place in our 9 network, of our network of 9 states. So that's kind of, there's opportunities to plug in there. And coming out of Passover, I think that there's this little known part of Passover that we do the night before Passover starts, where we go through our house. You clean very thoroughly. Some people's tradition is to clean like really intensely, and that's when you'll see kitchens covered in tinfoil, or covered in like laminate paper. Just like, people will clean really thoroughly, and you go and you hunt for like remaining pieces of bread, and so like the family will like hide pieces of bread, and typically it's the children going and finding the bread by candlelight, and you take a feather and you like scoop up the remaining pieces of bread, and then you burn it symbolically to say like, our house is free of chametz. Chametz are like the group of foods that we don't eat during Passover. And one thing that we're incorporating in my family this year is we're writing down all of the things that we want to like relieve ourselves of after Passover is over, all of the things that are weighing on us that are really heavy. And we're going to burn those in the way that we burn our chametz, in the way that we burn the bread, so that we can leave Passover feeling more focused on this topic of liberation, this collective identity of Judaism, of our people, of the things that we've experienced and have overcome. And to say like, we are still here and we're still thriving, and we're not going away anytime soon.
Love that. One of the questions I always like to ask when we're talking with faith leaders about their particular practices, how can folks in other faith traditions be supportive of you during this Passover season?
Yeah, during this time. Passover is one of my favorite holidays, in part because our Seders, my Seder specifically, often I like have tons of interfaith friends there. So I have my friends of all of their different faith backgrounds, and I invite them to come to our Seder table and to experience our Seder. And I think one of the best things you can do is, if you're invited to a Seder, go. Like if you don't host your own if you're not Jewish, but like if someone if one of your friends invites you to a Seder, you should go. And just be mindful. I think like when you come as a guest, I'm very Southern, and so I'm like, well, I have to bring something. Don't bring food products or anything that's consumable. Bring flowers or something that people, a candle, I don't know, something that people can use, but like that isn't something that they're going to eat, because depending on how people prepare for Passover, some people are very strict about what comes in and out of their house. I know I'm the person who hosts my Passover Seder because I clean my house in a certain way, and I, want to maintain a level of cleanliness throughout Passover, because that's my specific practice. And yeah, I mean, I would say like, honestly, right now, the Jewish community really needs people who want to be our allies, who want to be our friends, who want to show up in good faith and ask questions and be curious and and understand our traditions. And really, I think for Passover, for our non-Jewish friends, it's about being like asking yourself really, like, how am I showing up for the Jews in my life, for the Jews in my community, and how am I being present for them in this time? And how are we coming together to really break bread, even if that bread is like matzah, bread of the affliction. So.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. Definitely helpful for me, and I know for many listeners. Emily, really appreciate the time today. Any closing thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah. I would say that Passover is one of my favorite holidays for a number of reasons. In part because it is such an accessible holiday. And it's one of the holidays in which it's very experiential. And our experience of actually you were supposed to treat yourself as if you yourself were a stranger in Egypt. And I think that there's so much that we can take from that and from the stories that we tell during the Passover holiday, the stories of Exodus, of reminding ourselves as a Jewish community, as people of faith, that like we at one time were strangers in a foreign land, and that we can then take that empathy and use it to transform the world that we live in today. So that's my final thing, is that there's so much beauty in this holiday, and that if you get the opportunity to experience it, you should. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
I love that, Emily. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a meaningful Passover. I will give you a chance before we close out here. Any shameless plugs you'd like to leave us with today?
Yeah, so the Reform Movement is working on this national level webinar that we're doing about the chaplain bill and our chaplain work, because this is something that in our work we've realized the Jewish community really galvanized behind and is a really big deal for our people, and it's showing up in a lot of different places that our Jewish community really cares about. So we're going to be doing that on May 7th at 7:00. You can find a registration link on the RAC's website, and it'll be a great opportunity to kind of celebrate the work that we've done in Texas and to take some of the learnings from that and to move it into things that we all can really do together to plug in and support the rest of the country.
I'll just say in response to that, we had Josh on a couple weeks ago for his closeout episode, and he talked about the work of public school defenders and people in local congregations throughout Texas really mobilizing at the school board level on the chaplains. And I'll just say, from being in those public school defender meetings, the Jewish community really did rally and made an enormous difference. And so I want to thank you and thank everyone who participated in that.
Thank you.
Emily, thanks again for the time. Really appreciate you and your work.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with Emily, and I hope all of you who celebrate Passover or any of the other holy seasons this month find meaning and hope. And I pray that you can hold fast to those feelings and that it sustains you and inspires you to continue the work for justice in our communities, both here at home and around the world. Texas Impact has tools, teams, and resources for you to get involved. Election season is coming. I hope you're joining teams and participating in the Texas Faith Votes campaign. For your tools to do all of that, check out our website at texasimpact.org. While you're there, I hope you'll take a moment to sign up to be a member of Texas Impact. Your membership supports this podcast and all of the work to engage Texans of faith to advocate for a more just and equitable Texas. If you have questions about any of it, please reach out. You can reach me at scott@texasimpact.org. And with that, I think it's time to close out this episode. So remember, the world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Atnet, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is B. Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.